So I'd like to introduce our featured speaker tonight is Cathy Heydt, sitting there in the back of the room. She is the Emeritus Vice Principal of the Perkins Lower School, preschool through middle school. Welcome, Cathy.
Thank you.
We also have District 33K's second Vice District Governor, Yvette Besmar, an associate member of our club, is here with us tonight. Welcome, Yvette.
Thank you for having me.
Would you like to say a few words about the importance of eyesight to Lions and Lions International?
Oh, certainly.
Good evening, everyone. Lions Club International was founded in 1917 by a Chicago businessman by the name of Melvin Jones out of the social impact that World War I had and the need that he saw for those in need. And he figured out that those that were doing a lot better and their business were thriving have the social responsibility to gather and get together and help those less fortunate. Moving forward, in 1920, Lions clubs go international when a club was funded in Chicago. In 1925, our international convention, Helen Keller had a plea to the Lions and asked them to become the Knights of the Blind and to begin a crusade against blindness. And it's just a little bit of a history of how Lions started to get involved with the visually impaired. In 1930, the white cane, the universal symbol that recognizes and protects individuals visually impaired, was introduced in the United States by the president of the Peoria, Kansas Lions Club, a fellow by the name of George Bonham. In 1931, the idea spread throughout. And since then, the white cane has become an international symbol of independence, giving blind citizens the right of way and all the protections when carrying the white cane. 1 century later, the Lions have become the name that is worldly recognized as a human service organization committed not only to serving the visually impaired, but to fund research and provide treatment for preventable blindness. Globally, we are committed to the treatment and prevention of river blindness, and more recently, due to the increase of diabetes education as one of the main causes of blindness in the United States. In Massachusetts, the Lions have been performing miracles for the last 75 years. It all started after World War II, and I will make it really short. It was found that premature babies were developing blindness, and nobody knew. They thought that perhaps their eyes were not fully developed due to their premature birth. The issue was that due to the fact that we were putting them in an incubator and just pushing oxygen to help their lungs develop, the amount of oxygen coming into the incubator was drying their corneas. And it was due to Massachusetts Lions research and funding for research that it was found that a 60-some cent valve was all it was needed to help those children not be blind. Due to the Lions research project, so many people have been just saved from being blind going forward. Our lives has changed, the world has changed, and our initiatives have widened. These days, we are not only committed to vision, we're always committed to prevention of hunger and food insecurity, diabetes education and research, help to the environment, and pediatric cancer. And it so goes on. In the word of Helen Keller, alone we can do so little, together we can do so much. If you want to know any more about Lions Clubs International and the efforts here in Massachusetts, I invite you to talk to Lion Bill Blunder or any of the fellow Stow Lions, or reach out to myself. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Yvette. Okay, Greg.
Thank you, Bill. Yeah, so the additional thing that we're doing tonight is we're very happy to help introduce the new digital magnifier, which was being funded by the Stow Lions Club and the Randall Library Friends Association. We contributed this in repurposing some donations that were made by 20 local businesses, and we really appreciate their service here. They had contributed to some advertising during the time that Cobit shut us down and we could not do the advertising, but they agreed that they would let this donation go to a worthy cause, and this is certainly that worthy cause. So we got donations from the Academy Gymnastics, the Acton Family Dental Care, Abushan Hardware, Curtis Septic, Derby Ridge Farm, Great Road Gas and Auto Repair, the H.H. Warren Insurance Agency, KW Realtor, Hudson Road Automotive, BGL Auto, the Miller Brothers Garage, Patterson Auto Body, Quinn Electric, Shaw's, the Stow House of Pizza, Stow Orthodontics, the Straff Associates, psychologists, TSS Graphics, Verizon, Palia Corporation, and Right Touch Massage for Health, as well as Exhale Massage and Relaxation. So we hope you'll patronize these organizations which have contributed to helping with vision impaired patrons of this library. So they are a big help to us. And so now I'd like to bring Cathy Heydt up to the podium here. She is now retired after 38 years of service with the Perkins School for the Blind in Watertown. And actually her husband provided a nice, very nice wildlife photography program for the Lions Club about 3 years ago. And Mitch was really is an excellent photographer. But Cathy has been a physical therapist and an orientation and mobility teacher. For 12 years before her retirement, as Bill said, she was the vice principal at Perkins for the lower school, pre-K through the middle school. And she has co-authored numerous books and has lectured internationally as well as locally at Boston College, UMass Boston. And after learning physical therapy at Russell Sage College in Troy, New York, she earned her master's and doctorate in physical therapy from Boston College. So she and Mitch live with us here in Stow. So Cathy, would you please introduce us here? I think as Knights for the Blind, we're always happy to learn more. And you are certainly the right person to do the job. So thank you for being here.
I think I'm turning it around a little bit so you can see it. And I don't know if many of you saw when I came in here, this folds down into a nice little carry case, and you flatten it down, you can open it up. This is a great device. It can be used by a lot of different people depending on their visual impairment. If they have a lot of vision, they can modify this so that they can change the magnification. You can make it bigger.
Cathy, wait to monitor that, just a
Oh,
little bit.
All right,
Perfect.
you like that?
Like it.
Okay. And then what you do is you have to move the reading material so that you can read the page. Move it up and down. You can use anything. You want to look at your bills, you want to read the newspaper, a magazine, a book, you can put any kind of printed material. You can even put like notes or letters that people have written in here. Some of the other features that it has, this is a cool feature. You can change the background. It's like here it's yellow with black letters. Some people see that better. Or a darker background with light letters. Everyone has a little bit different way they would look at something, and this gives you some variation in there. You can also adjust the brightness. Sometimes people with their visual impairments, they can't see really well if it's too bright. So you can kind of adjust it, which is really, really nice. Simple device, can be used by a lot of people. You don't need a lot of training to know how to use it. You can kind of almost figure it out by yourself. it's a great addition for the library to have here for people, and it's a really good thing that you've done to bring this here. So I think that's really important to be able to have something like this available, especially for the people who live here in Stow. A lot of people who are vision impaired might have something like this at home, but it's not, you're not going to lug it around. So if you want to go to the library and utilize something that's here, this is great to have it and be able to use by the people in our community. So it's a good thing you did. All right. The other thing that I was asked to do today was to talk about my time at Perkins. So I've done a couple things. I was going to show a PowerPoint with a lot of pictures, but what I've done is I've put the pictures on a loop on my laptop, so I'll just put them out here if you want to pass it around so you can see what Perkins looks like. I don't know how many of you have been there, but this will just give you an idea of what it's like there, what the students are like. So that'll just run, you can do whatever you like with it. Just to start off a little bit, I'm from Connecticut. I never planned on living in Massachusetts, but I did. But that's where I started. I started out as a physical therapist in the days when all you needed was a bachelor's degree. And nowadays you need a doctorate in physical therapy to practice. But I started out with a bachelor's and I worked at Easter Seals in Connecticut. And I worked there for several years. After I was there, I was like, I want to do something more. I want to increase my knowledge. I wanted to get another degree. There were no advanced degrees in physical therapy. So I was trying to figure out what should I do, where do I go? And I remembered when I was in college, the people from the Albany Association for the Blind came and talked to our physical therapy group, our class, our senior class. And they talked all about being an orientation and mobility specialist. And we were all like, what is that? What do you do? They showed us how to do sighted guide, how do you guide someone who's visually impaired. They talked about all the type of things that they would do. And then they gave this amazing sales pitch and said, it would be great to have someone who is a physical therapist be an orientation mobility specialist. So we were all like, wow, that's great, we should do that someday. But none of us ever did. So when I was trying to figure out what to do, I had a couple options. My first option was, believe it or not, I had 3 patients who had hemophilia, and they tend to have a lot of issues with their joints. So I had 3. I was considered the expert in the state of Connecticut with my 3 patients. So the Hemophilia Association said, we'd love you to be our physical therapist. We'll hire you, we'll send you to California, you can do extra training, it would be great. And I was like, that sounds interesting. My cousin, Mary Murphy, and I have family in Ireland. We had been there several times, and we were wondering, we'll go live in Ireland for a year. That would be a really nice thing to do. We could live with our family there, we could get jobs, it would be a great experience. Then I was like, oh, but what about this idea of being an orientation mobility specialist? Maybe I should look at that. So I did a little research in the local library because no internet. You know, you have to, where do you go? And I found out the only program in New England was here in Boston, at Boston College. So I thought, all right, I'll call the head of the program and ask some questions. And that's all I wanted to do was ask some questions. I got on the phone with him, and he was busy, and he said, I'll call you back. And I was at work, so I was like, all right, call me back if I'm available, I'll talk to you. So he finally called me back, and my boss is there going, there's some guy from Boston College who wants to talk to you, you know, are you available? So I did. And he's like, so what are you doing? What are you doing now? And I told him I was a physical therapist at Easter Seal. And he's like, oh, we would love to have you here at Boston College. This would be wonderful. Not only that, we're a grant-driven program. We cover the tuition. We give you room and board. We not room and board. We give you a stipend to pay for your apartment. You should come to Boston. So in 1979, my cousin Mary Murphy and I moved to Boston, and that's how we ended up here. The year at Boston College, let me start off with, there are a variety of professionals that work with people who are visually impaired. One is called the teacher of the visually impaired. They're the people who teach Braille, how to read it, how to write it, how to use devices like this. I know when Phil told me you were going to get this and he says, can you demonstrate it? I'm like, I'm not sure because that's not what I teach. I know the kids at our school can use these things all the time. I've seen them use it, I wasn't sure, but I knew the basics. But that's the teacher of the visually impaired. They're the teachers in the classroom for people who are visually impaired. They're also, if someone who's older loses their vision, they're the individual who would teach you to read Braille, or what kind of avenues do you have to do reading if you decide Braille is not something you want to learn later in life. The other person is an orientation mobility instructor or specialist. We are the people who teach you how to use a long cane. We are the people who teach you how to travel, how to get from point A to point B. How do you stay safe in the environment? How do you use environmental information so that you know where you are in space? That's what an orientation mobility specialist does. So it's actually a great combination with a physical therapist because it's both kind of very physical and you kind of know what you're doing with that. The third professional that you will probably hear about is called a vision rehab therapist. They recently changed the name of that professional. This person teaches you things like, how do you know you have a $10 bill in your hand or a $20 bill? Did you open up a can of peas or a can of corn? How do you use your stove without getting burned? So they teach you the practical skills of how to function in your life. So those are the three main professionals that work in, with people who are visually impaired. Boston College at that time, the program was a one-year program. It was a pretty healthy, full calendar year. You took your coursework in the evenings, and during the morning in the first semester, we learned how to use this cane. I can travel in downtown Boston with a blindfold on and not trip off a curb. We have to learn all the skills, we have to be able to travel with the skills, we have to have confidence in the skills so that when we teach someone, we know when we tell them this will keep you safe, we know it, and we know that we can convince them that they are going to be safe as well. So that's our first semester, and we take all our coursework in the evening. Second semester, we go to, during the day we do student teaching all day long, coursework in the evening. So this brings me to how did I end up at Perkins? It was not by my choice. It was not something I wanted to do. For student teaching, we were able to give some ideas of where we wanted to go. We knew the different sites we could go to, and we could put in a list of what we wanted. I put in my list. I felt very confident I would get something on my list, and then I was assigned Perkins. I was devastated. I mean, I'm not somebody who gets emotionally attached to things. I went home and cried that night. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to get out of this. I just didn't want to go there. And the main reason is I don't like working with kids. So I'm like, what am I going to do? How do I convince them that this is a mistake? So I asked to meet with the head of the department, who I have considered one of the greatest mentors, professional mentors in my life. I went into him, I sat down, and I was like, I can't do this. I can't work with kids. I don't know how to, I just was like panicking. And he sat there very calmly, listened to everything I had to say, and then he looked me in the eye, and I'm going to quote him, looked me in the eye and he said, "Perkins is your match." And I was like, oh, don't ask me to do this. And he goes, I'm going to ask you to go, do your best, and give it a chance. So I did. I gave it a chance. I went there. I was there from January to June, and it was a long time. And I worked there every single day. I worked in the program that I ran before I left. And it was just something that I found out I was really good at working with kids. There was something really good at being at Perkins School for the Blind. That summer we had to do an internship. I went to the Montreal Association for the Blind. And then I had to start thinking about where am I going to get a job? I ended up with a master's in special education in orientation and mobility. And I'm kind of like, where am I going to work now? Well, my cousin Mary, back in the beginning, the two of us, we met our future husbands during that year. So neither one of us wanted to leave Massachusetts at that time. I was offered a job at the Carroll Center for the Blind, and I took it. So I'm there, I'm out of school, I had this great job at Carroll Center for the Blind. I was what was called an itinerant instructor. I had my area was Boston and out to west in Framingham. I had all the new college students who came into town who were visually impaired, who wanted to learn their college campuses. How do you take the T? How do you get home? These were all the things they wanted to learn. I'm on a lesson, and it's near the Perkins campus. I've been working for the Carroll Center for 6 weeks. And they're like, there's a job open. You need to put your name in for this job. And I'm like, I really like what I'm doing. Next day, I get a phone call from the head of the program. You need to come in, at least come in for an interview. Next thing I know, I'm working there. And I stayed there for 38 years, and technically, I'm still there, because I'm actually still working there now. I've gone back and forth since I've retired. But I have to say that my mentor knew what he was talking about. I started working in Perkins, like I said, in 1980. My job was the perfect job. It was split. Half the time I was a physical therapist, half the time I was orientation and mobility specialist. I didn't have to give up either one of my professions, which was a definite plus. And as they said in my introduction, the last 12 years I was the equivalent of the vice principal of a school. A career choice, again, I never would have thought of. I never thought I would be able to do that. And it was just an amazing opportunity to become someone who helped run a program in a world-renowned school. A little bit about Perkins, just to kind of get you to know where we are. It was founded in 1829. Perkins was the first school for the blind in the United States. When the school started, it was held in a home in Boston that belonged to Thomas Perkins. That's why the school is named Perkins. The first director was Samuel Gridley Howe, H-O-W-E. And one of our biggest buildings on campus is called the Howe Building. It's the main building it has this gigantic tower. I'm sure you've all seen the tower that has amazing bells in it. If you've ever heard people play the changing of the bells, our bells are wonderful. And another thing to keep in mind is Perkins is a private tuition-based school. A lot of people wonder how do we function, but we're a private school. On campus, there are on-campus programs, and then there's off-campus programs. On campus, there is a program that I worked in. It's called the Early Learning Center and the lower school. It's combined, the preschool, elementary school, and middle school. So our students go from about 3 up to about 15. Then there is the secondary program, which is a high school age program, but it goes up to 22. That's because funding for children with disabilities goes up to 22. There is the Deafblind Program. It's a separate, these are all in separate buildings on our campus. Our campus is like a little college campus. And the Deafblind Program, highly specialized. I don't know if any of you have ever known people that work in special ed. We all think the people that work in deafblind programs have the hardest job to do and they do the most miraculous things that we see. And their program goes from 3 to 22. At any given time, usually there's about 170, 175 students in the on-campus programs. There are day and residential program options for the students who come there. So some students are just day students, some stay all day and in the evening, or there on the weekends. How do students come to Perkins? That's a really good question. Oh, and also, if you have questions, stop me, because I'm happy to answer them. Students are referred by school districts or their families. So we frequently get contacted by a school district saying, we have a student who we cannot provide services for. Or it's a family who's contacting us saying, we have a child and we're not happy what's going on in the public schools. So they want to know what to do. They sometimes, once we hear from a student or a family or a school district, then we make an arrangement for them to come visit the school. They're seen by our evaluation team, and they're seen by the team that the child fits into. So people are always asking me, do you know so-and-so at Perkins? And I may not, because we're all in separate buildings. We don't know each other necessarily, but we know our programs really well. So the student is matched to the program, they come in for a visit, the team looks at the child, and then a decision is made whether we think the child would do well in our program, or do we have the program that they need, and then we either accept or we say we don't think we're the right placement for you. Sometimes we say we don't think we're the right placement, and the family and the school district convinces us that we are the best option. They don't have an option in their school district and that we should still take them. Once a student is accepted into the program, we have to have approval from the school district because it's the school district that pays the tuition. That's where the money comes from, all right? And it's because every school district is responsible to provide the education for the child in the best program that they can have. Massachusetts has one of the most generous special ed laws in the country. And so our students in this state get very good services. They get some of the best services in the country. Community supports. Now, off campus, what we found is that there were a lot of things that Perkins could do to provide support to the communities. Number one, there's a whole program that provides vision specialists to the public school system. So they send out teachers of the visually impaired, they send out orientation mobility instructors to the school districts to provide the services in those schools so that the students can stay in their own local public school and at home with their families. We do evaluations for students who do not go to our school, where a child would come for 2 days, we would do a complete assessment, and then send recommendations to the school system. Say, these are things that you should work on, these are activities you should do with them, this is materials you should use with them. There is an infant toddler program. The infant toddler program is a great fun program. It's for babies, newborn babies to 3. And the families come to Perkins once a month, and they meet other parents that have children who are visually impaired because most likely they don't know anyone else who has a child who's visually impaired. They get to see a social worker who helps connect them in their communities with services that they might need in the community. So it's a nice activity for them. Another thing is Perkins has a library. For anyone, and I want to tell you this, and you can spread it around with people that you know, it's for anyone who's visually impaired, has a reading disability, even if you just can't hold a book long enough to read, you can apply for like a membership type thing, and they will send you out books on tape. You do not have to be totally blind or legally blind. It might be that you just have an issue with your vision, and they will provide you with any kind of a book on tape that you can use, and they send it out to your home. And then when you're done, you send it back, and it's really a nice service. One of the other things that Perkins does is online courses, workshops, trainings for anyone around the world that wants to learn more about working with individuals who are visually impaired or children that also have additional disabilities. Perkins International, that's another whole section that Perkins has. They provide a lot of different services internationally. Mostly it's through training of professionals in their country so that they can provide services or set up programs in their country. First, they have what's called the Educational Leadership Program, and that's where Perkins identifies what they say are leaders or potential leaders in the field of vision, in other countries. They bring these people to Perkins, they stay for a year, they get all kinds of coursework, training, some of them go to local universities, and when they're done, then they go back to their countries. An example is, a few years ago, they had a woman who was a college professor at one of the universities in her country. She came here so that she could figure out how to set up a course in their university on teaching teachers to work with individuals that were visually impaired and had additional disabilities. So she went back, she came here, learned all these skills, went back and set up this program so that in their country they now have a university level program to teach teachers to work with kids that are visually impaired. They also have what's called the Perkins International Academy. This is something new. It's a program that is all training online, provided by Perkins to people in other countries, and they end up with a certificate saying that they are now qualified to be somebody who knows this information in their country. Last thing, it's just an interesting piece of information. Perkins International Program was started with a multi-million-dollar, multi-year grant from Conrad Hilton, which was amazing. He set this up, he gave this money. We now have a building on campus named after him because they gave so much money. Part of the grant was that after so many years, Perkins had to find their own funding to continue the program, and they have. But Conrad Hilton Foundation, it must have been at least 10, 15 years they funded this program. And I benefited from it immensely, which I'll show you now. So now, any questions about that before I go to the next thing?
I'm just curious, are most of your students from Massachusetts, or do you have students from all over?
Most of them are from Massachusetts and the greater Boston area. They come and go every single day. We do have students from other states, Maine, Rhode Island, Connecticut, mostly. We frequently have families that move from other states and come to Massachusetts so that their child can go, 2 reasons. So their child can go to Perkins, and so they can get the health care at Children's. It's kind of a big pairing that they do, but we have several kids from Maine. Yes.
How many schools like this are in the country?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know the answer, but I'm going to say maybe in the 20s.
It's not very many.
It's not very many. They kind of come and go. Funding changes. Some states are more generous with the funding. Some states are more, they have more funding, or people can elect to go to the School for the Blind. I know in Maryland, their school, you don't have to go through this whole thing like here where we have to get the school district to say yes. It's like a parent can say, I want my child to go to the School for the Blind. They go, all right. So, did you have a question?
I did. I was interested in the residential program. What is the limit of youth, or how young will you take someone for?
All right. Usually, our program has the youngest children, and the Deafblind Program has some very young children. We usually say we do not like to take 5, 6, 7-year-olds in. We prefer to say they should stay home. Depending on programming. Up in Maine, upstate Maine, they may not have anything. And sometimes they have given us a good argument that that child should come to us at that young age and be residential. Over the last, I'm going to say, 5 to 10 years, the number of students we have residentially has dramatically declined. Families are now better prepared to keep a child who has a disability at home. Communities are better prepared to have a child who has a disability in their community. So our residential numbers are almost 0 for our program. We have one boy from Maine who now comes down. But I see it as a sign of progress because our parents are better prepared, better trained to work with their own children at home. It used to be when I started working, it was like, please help me, take my child and help my child. Now parents come to us and they're like, tell me how to help my child. which is really the way it should be. I feel like that's something where those of us in this profession, in these fields, I think we've done a good job so that our parents feel like they can handle their own child at home, which is really what they want. All right, so now the rest of the time I'm going to spend talking about what I love or what I have enjoyed the most and what amazing opportunities I have had as a professional working at Perkins School for the Blind. And there have been many. I have had all kinds of things that I have been able to do. So the first thing I'm going to tell you about is one of the really enjoyable things that I've been able to do is, as part of a team, planned playgrounds for children who have disabilities and children who are visually impaired. This started quite a while ago. We had a group, and we had one of the world-renowned playground designers come to Perkins, and he said, I'd love to work with some people and design a playground. And we were like, oh, that'd be great. I think that would be wonderful. So we worked for about 1.5 years, and we built on our campus one of the first handicap-accessible playgrounds in the world. It was back when everything was made out of wood, and it was an amazing playground. It was just the best. We only built a portion of the playground, though, because we had to raise funds, and it was just very, very good. He went on, the man who designed this, went on to work with commercial companies utilizing all these ideas. So a lot of the commercial playgrounds you now see are based on things that we came up with and ideas, which was just phenomenal. Just a couple years before I left, we needed to replace that original playground because it was wood and it was falling apart. And we planned another new playground, and we were able to come up with more ideas, and it was just really, really great. Other things that, because of these things that I've been able to work on, is consulting with the playground at the Franklin Park Zoo in Boston. I was able to consult with them. I've consulted with the Boston Museum of Science on how to make their activities more accessible to people who are visually impaired. And the most recent thing I did, I don't know if you've been to the Discovery Museum in Acton, I was part of a group that helped plan the accessible treehouse, which was, again, a lot of fun to be on that little group. So that was a fun little niche. Another thing, publications. Something I never thought I would do is write a book. And these are two, which I can just put here. This one, welcoming students with visual impairment to your classroom. This one it's a group of 4 presentations that professionals can give. It's like, if you're going to do a presentation on these topics, how would you do it? So that's the whole thing, from the PowerPoint to activities that you would do, because a lot of people do it. This one here is the Perkins Activity Guide. It's the #1 publication that Perkins has. It's currently in its 3rd edition, which is an ebook that just came out a couple months ago. But these are two books that, again, I never would have thought I would do it. The Perkins Activity Guide started one day after my partner, an occupational therapist, and we were out doing recess duty, and we used to do a lot of groups together at Perkins. And we were like, okay, we've been here for a few years, we should do something that's a little more professional. Why don't we publish something? And we said, we'll publish a pamphlet for parents. Well, that's what the pamphlet is. We were also all around recess duty, we were like, I don't know if we can do this by ourselves. And we were like, oh, there's 2 teachers all around there. Let's go ask them to join us. So that's how we made our initial 5 people that wrote that book. And I'll just give you an example of how that worked out is we were all kind of young and newly married, and the occupational therapist and myself had just come back from maternity leave with our first child. So the 5 key authors of that book, it took us 5 years to write it because we were all working full time, and the rest of our team were all having their children. And there was one evening where this friend of mine who's an occupational therapist, we were in the basement of her house. She's breastfeeding a baby. I'm playing with her 3-year-old to keep her busy. And she's dictating to me what to write down, because there were no computers then. And she's telling me what to write down to do it. So that's why it took us 5 years to get that. But we all survived, and the children are all relatively normal, and we're all still married to our husbands. The next amazing thing that I had an opportunity to do was to be adjunct faculty at local universities. The same man who talked me into working at Perkins contacted me, and he goes, okay, now that you've been working for a while, we'd like you to come and teach a class at Boston College in the Vision Specialties program. And I was like, no, I don't think I can do that. And he did, cut me into it. So he was like, it's just for the summer, and I think you could do a really good job with it. My supervisor at Perkins, he goes, I think this is great. Perkins will, if you need time, you need to leave early, Perkins will support it. I think you should take advantage of this. So I did. I taught at Boston College for 6 years in the graduate program for this vision specialties. The grant funding money dried up that year, after 6 years. So the program shifted to UMass Boston. And UMass Boston asked me if I would come there and help start the program. I could just slide my course over there, go through their system, and then I taught there for another, it was 30 years total in the vision specialties. So it ended up, I knew like almost every vision specialist in the New England area, because this was the only program in New England, which was really fun. But I never would have been able to have that opportunity, I think, if I hadn't worked at Perkins. The last place I did do some teaching for, technically, was Fitchburg State University. My daughter always told me I was going down. I started at BC. But I was like, no. Fitchburg State is a lovely place. But Perkins started doing online courses, and they wanted to be able to offer college credits for it. Because teachers, if they earn more credits, they get a higher pay. So they wanted to be able to award graduate credits if people would take these courses. So they asked me to come up with a course that they could put online, and that I could get through the program or what it was offered at Fitchburg State, and it worked out perfectly. So again, that was again something that I never thought I would be able to do. Okay, the next one's a big one. I'm going to say maybe 15 years ago. We were looking at our specific building that our program was in. It was in one of the original 1912 buildings. It was a beautiful building, lots of character, amazing architecture. It was designed after your classic schools in England. It was a building that was all around the outside. It had this beautiful courtyard in the inside. It was really bad for kids with disabilities. It was great in the beginning, I think, when Perkins started, and the students were just visually impaired. But as the population changed and we started having more multiple disabilities, it was hard for them to function in this building. So we needed to build a new building. So we had a whole process of going through designing a building. What would we design for a building that would be ideal for kids that have visual impairments and had additional disabilities? We came up with this design. The architecture team was wonderful. Then we had a construction team that came in and built the building. It was sometimes arduous, but most time it was amazing. I was involved. I had my own hard hat from the company with my name on it. I remember the day they had us come in and they had all of our hats, and they had the director of our program, my hat, and then the man who used to be in charge of our residential program. And we all had our own little hard hats, and our yellow vests and everything. And we had to go to a construction meeting every week. I personally had to come in on a weekend once and approve the location of every outlet in the building. This is a 3-floor building plus a basement. I mean, it was like, they had me come in and they were like, should the carpet go this way or this way? And I'm like, yeah, I really have to make that decision? But the building ended up being a really unique building. People would come in and say, it looks very plain, it's very simple, it's a building that's easy to travel in, it's a building that children who are learning their travel skills can be fairly independent. The building fosters independence. We did a lot of work with utilizing high-colored contrasts, surfaces that are non-glare so that the kids could see better, lighting that didn't cause glare. We used a lot of natural lighting. It's also a very environmental building. It's a great space for our students. And it was a big change from this older building to go into this building. We also did a lot of educational activities when the building was going up. One of my favorites that we did was when the bricklayers came and the foundation was going in, the bricklayers made it so that one day all of our kids could go out and lay one brick with their name on it. Okay? And you should have seen it. The construction workers cleared everything so that all the wheelchairs could get through it. And if they couldn't, there was like 4 construction workers that would come out and lift up the wheelchairs and move them up there so the kids could get close to the foundation. It was amazing what they did. The other thing we did is we set up an email address for the gentleman who was the foreman on the construction site so that our kids could write him questions. And their questions would be things like, what was going on yesterday that vibrated our building? And he would be like, I don't know. And then he'd find out and he'd go, it was because we used this machine. And the kids would be, one kid sent him an email, how do you make a floor? And the head of the construction, he was like, he had that plastered on his wall. How do you make a floor? But they did all kinds of things like that. They had one day where the students could go out and explore all the different excavation tools, the different diggers, so that they could do that. The other thing that was more interesting for you is our new building was right across from the old building. Our old building, we stayed in the old building while it was being built. Our old building did not have air conditioning, so we had to open the windows all the time. So here we have the old building was like over there, that wall, the new building was over here. Construction workers don't always have the cleanest language. So what we didn't always see is the construction team on the school building, the old one, put up these signs. Would you say that if your children were here? And all these great signs about watch your language, please remember who's on the other side of this wall. The day we were moving in, we moved in over a Christmas holiday. We had 2 weeks off at Perkins for the Christmas holiday. And all the construction guys were there. And they couldn't wait to watch the kids come in. And the kids came over, we came over, and they came over with their wagons and carts. And they brought things from their classroom to put into their new classroom so that they could visit their new classroom before they went on vacation, so that they would know where they would go, were going to come when they came back. And it was just so much fun to watch the construction workers about seeing what it was like when they would come in. We also used this opportunity as a teaching opportunity for this construction team, the design team, about what they were doing and why they were doing it. Our team, our construction design team, came in under budget and early. And I don't think many people can say that. And I think they did it because they wanted to do it for our kids. And it was wonderful to watch them all do this. And it was really a great opportunity, I think. All right, next. I've had phenomenal opportunities of traveling around the country and around the world, doing trainings and workshops. I'm working with children who are visually impaired and have additional disabilities. Nationally, it's been to usually give a presentation at a conference for a professional group somewhere in the country. But internationally, it would be a couple-week trip to some place where I might spend 1 week consulting, seeing students in their area, and then doing a week-long presentation. Some of the places, they're not your average places that you would go. Some of the places I've gone to, a few places in South America, Uruguay was the first international training I ever did. I was sent to Uruguay. I was a nervous wreck. It was a conference. I'm working with children with visual impairment who had cerebral palsy. That was the pairing for the conference. It was held in Montevideo, Uruguay, and one of the things that was big about it, it was for all the countries in South America. So they all came to Uruguay to come to this thing. And it was 2 weeks. And like I said, it was my first time. It was the only time I went by myself on an international training. I didn't like it, again. But it was an amazing experience. First thing, before anybody would go on these things, our international team would sit you down and they would say things like, okay, don't do this, don't do that, don't do this kind of hand gesture, it's obscene in that country. Don't say this, don't say that. Go prepared, but be prepared to change everything when you get there. Because you might get there and find out everything you've prepared is not what you need, and you'll be up until midnight, 1 o'clock, redoing everything you prepared to try something different the next day. And I found that to be true. The scariest thing that happened to me is people in South America are very boisterous, especially Brazilians. I found that out, I don't know why, but for some reason they will corner you and ask you more questions than anyone else. There was one point that after a day, you lecture like 8 hours. It goes on all day long. What they did was at lunchtime, they would set up one table so that different people could sit and have lunch with me. And basically, they were just asking me questions. So I would keep answering questions the whole time. One day it was so intense, the woman who coordinated everything locked them all, pushed me into an elevator, and she said, go up to your room fast. All right, I will do that. It literally felt to me like somebody had put suction cups on the sides of my head to suck out every piece of information that I had. Other thing is, going to other countries and speaking with an interpreter is a whole different thing. No one tells you what's the best way to do it. And I had one interpreter who was very gracious to me, and she goes, okay, let me explain to you how to do this. And it was the woman from Montevideo. And she was like, shorten what you say, let me translate, and then say the next bit. Don't give like 5 minutes and expect me to translate the whole thing. So I did that. I got into bits and pieces. The other thing you have to make sure is you make eye contact with the audience, not the interpreter. You're not there talking to the interpreter and then they talk to everyone else. It was really everything I thought went very smoothly at my first one until I said something that evidently was very controversial. And the interpreter knew this, and she looked at me and she goes, are you sure you want to say that? And I was very confident that I wanted to say it. I said something about muscle tone in people or children that have cerebral palsy. And I said that it was neurologically based. It was because there was damage in the motor cortex of your brain, and that's why the muscles are the way they are, why they have spasticity. And I was like, so what's wrong with that? And she goes, it's just controversial. You want me to say that? And I said, yes. And she said it and the room was silent. And then I was like, so I understand that this is controversial. Why? And so they explained to me that in most of the countries at that time in South America, they thought it was an emotional issue. And that the children, if you gave them counseling, would be able to use their muscles. And I was like, that's wrong. It is not that. I can send you information later on, or maybe I can find it. And that was, you couldn't Google anything at that time. I will send you articles on this when I get back. So that's what I did, but it was amazing that there were those kind of differences. I also, in South America, I did a training in Chile, in Santiago. I was sent with another person that time, because when I came back, I was like, going by yourself is too isolating. I didn't even have time to go out and even go to a restaurant. I would hide in my room and change everything and get it ready, so I didn't really I enjoyed the experience. So when we went to Chile, it was a little different. We were sent, two of us went, and we were sent to the first Deafblind Program started in Chile. It was started in the basement of a church by a family who had a child who was hearing and visually impaired. And they wanted a place for their child to go to school. So they started this program in the basement of the church. And it was this lovely little program, and they just needed some help in figuring some things out. They were very lean on equipment. And I have to say, I had an actual miracle worker moment. There was a child who was struggling to walk. She had some issues with motor control in her legs. She basically needed a little walker. But they had no equipment, and they didn't have equipment that they could buy or anything. So I was trying to explain to them what she needed, and there was a chair, and the chair was the perfect height for what she needed, and it was the perfect thing. And I said, she needs something like this. And I pulled the chair up. I put something, I said, we need something that's heavy in the seat. And then I walked this little girl over and put her hands in the chair, and she walked down the hall. And everybody was gasping as if I had worked some miracle. No, she just needs the right piece of equipment. So then I spent like the next hour explaining why that chair was perfect for her, because I said she's going to grow and she's going to need something else. So then we talked about, there wasn't even like PVC piping where you could make something about that with that. I said maybe we could look at some other options and what kind of things could be used for kids here. And that was another time where we, actually what we did was we came back, Perkins had some old walkers that were child size, and we sent them down to them so that they could use that. I did several trainings over in Eastern Europe, which were very fun. One in Romania, and I went twice to Slovakia. Slovakia had, they both had nice schools for the blind in the area, and when I went there, one of the times I went to Slovakia, I had already been an administrator at that point, and we did a couple, there were 3 of us that went. We did a 2-week training on working with kids, doing assessments with kids, and the administrator needed support and help to figure out how to help his staff make changes that we made at Perkins. When I first started at Perkins, we worked with children that were basically only visually impaired. They might have had some subtle learning disabilities or some subtle motor disabilities. But over time, those students were better served in the public school system, and they were doing a really good job with it. And we tended to get more students that had more physical disabilities, cognitive disabilities, and they were more involved. In Slovakia at this time, they were starting to see that change. And when we saw that change at Perkins, a lot of our teaching staff were like, this is not what I'm trained for. So it took someone like, actually the fact that I was a teacher and a physical therapist, they listened to me when I was like, you can do this. We just need to make some subtle changes and gradually. So our teachers made those subtle changes. And when I went to Slovakia, that administrator needed help with the same type of thing. How do you help your staff make those changes? And I said, well, you have trainings like we're doing now. I gave them a whole list of books to buy. I gave them all kinds of information saying, these are things you need to start having available for your staff and help them make this change. The Philippines. I did a really fun training in the Philippines. I went with actually a very good friend of mine who's a teacher at Perkins, and we went together, and that was a lot of fun. The first week we spent out in the countryside, visiting families and helping them work with their kids and consulted around activities they should do. Remember I talked about the Perkins Educational Leadership Program, which is an international program where people were brought over here. We saw some of the people that had gone through that program, and we went and saw their students in their community. So when we gave suggestions and ideas, we gave them to her, and she was able to carry them out. One day, we went out in the middle of the countryside, and we walked through a prawn farm where there were these big pools, and they were raising prawn. We had to walk over little bamboo bridges over streams, and we arrived at this beautiful little bamboo hut where they wove the walls together and everything to make it. When we walked into this hut, which was typical that we went into, 3 generations of a family lived there, and it would be a room about this size, maybe. This is generous. And we walked into this room in this hut, and the roofs are about this high because they're all really short. So I felt like a giant. And you felt like, is my hair or my head touching that? But we walk in, and on the wall is a poster. And it has all of these different pictures cut out. They're like sketches cut out and put on this poster, and it's all positions for them to use with the child who had disabilities. And that poster was made out of a handout that I gave to this teacher when she was at Perkins, saying that these are things that could help you work with your students. And I'm like, that's my handout. And she goes, that's what we do. When we see a new child, we make a poster of things that are appropriate for them and activities for the family to carry out. So when you see the impact of that was a 1-hour lecture I gave. And here they used it, and they used it in another country out in the middle of nowhere. I'll never forget that. We also did a training in Vietnam, which was fascinating. Again, it was 2 weeks, so we spent some time out visiting kids in their homes. And there were 2 schools for the blind. It's in Ho Chi Minh City. One is run by a group of Catholic nuns, and the other one is the government school. We had one translator, I'll never forget her, and she was like, okay, we lectured at both places. The conference was trying to unite these 2 schools for the blind so that they would work collaboratively. And we went to both schools, we lectured at both schools, but they all came together when we did the lectures, so it was kind of fun. That translator, at the very beginning, she goes, I'm going to tell you now, when you speak, depending on what you say, I can translate anything you say at the school, the Catholic school, but at the government school, I cannot say everything that you say. And we were like, can you give us an example? She goes, I'll give you a simple one. Someone sneezes and you say, God bless you. At the Catholic school, I can translate that. At the government school, I can't say that. And I was like, so you'll say an equivalent? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, all right. And she goes, if it's technical, I'll ask you before I do it. But it was interesting, this mindset. I think one of the most interesting things about this was there was the government school, they wanted to set up, their administrator had been to Perkins and had toured our program, our school program. And he wanted to set up his program more like ours. So he had identified different professionals in his school to be the physical therapists and the occupational therapists, because they don't have therapists that work in schools in other countries. Some of that is changing now. They usually work only in medical facilities. So he said, I want to do this. So he had identified a woman who was going to be the physical therapist. And I met her, and I was like, so what's your background? She goes, I'm the massage teacher. That is one of the main skills they teach people who are visually impaired in other countries. It's a skill and a job that they can do. It's something that they do really well at. They really excel. And so I'm like, this is actually really good. She understands muscles. She understands bones. This is pretty good. So she and I sat down. We went through all of the students and identified all the students who would need physical therapy. She set up a plan. I set up the programs. So I said, you're going to do these activities. And before I left, I sat with her and we did all the activities with each one of the kids. Then when I got back, I bought a couple of books with a lot of pictures on therapeutic activities. And I sent her like a therapy ball. I sent her a couple of different types of things, pieces of equipment. And Perkins paid for all of this. That's what the amazing thing is. Perkins paid for all of this. We sent it to her. At that point, phones, you could take pictures and email pictures. So what she would do is she would email me reports on the students. And then I would say, okay, try this activity. It's on page so-and-so in your book. And then if she needed a different piece of equipment, Perkins sent her another piece of equipment. It worked incredibly well. The only bad thing is she got so good at doing this, she decided to go back to school to learn other skills, and she ended up being a university instructor on teaching people how to work with kids with disabilities. So these kind of things where you have to kind of brainstorm and how are we going to do this, and it can be very, very challenging. So that's my traveling thing. My best memories of working at Perkins, hands down, it's the kids. The kids are amazing. If you were having a bad day, 10 minutes in that school building and you were smiling. It could be for anything. They smiled at you, they said hi to you. Yes.
Do they still send teachers out to the schools?
Yes.
The houses, homes,
Houses, no.
to the homes? Just
I shouldn't say no so quickly. On occasion, I know as a mobility instructor, we would sometimes go into the homes to work on routes in the neighborhood or traveling in their neighborhood. But for the most part, they don't go into the homes. Preschool, the infant toddler program, they do. Those little babies, they do sometimes go. But the kids are the best thing that we all do. Next best thing is the staff at Perkins is phenomenal. I have never worked with such a group of dedicated, hardworking people that all have like the same mindset. We're all there for the same reason. We are there to figure out what's the best thing for each individual child. And that just binds us all together. Yes, by the end of the school year, we're all sick and tired of each other and we need a break. Yes.
Now you work a lot with the physical things. I'm wondering, the academic teachers, you must consult with them quite a bit, don't you?
It's a huge team approach.
Yeah.
The teams for each child meet on a regular basis. The classroom teachers, I mean, like, we're all right in the same building. It's not like anybody is far away. So as a physical therapist, I'm in that classroom saying, this chair is the best kind of chair. This is how this table should be at this height so that they could reach these things. I would say, if this child is slower, move this thing down lower so they can see it. You don't, and then you have the vision specialist who goes in the low vision classroom who says, you need this piece of equipment. Or I go to the teacher and I say, what routes does this child need to know? It's constant. You're talking with them all the time. It's like everybody's just down the hall from each other. And it's a very collaborative approach for it. Last thing I'm going to talk about is our families. Our families are what drive it. The families drive getting their children the best services that they can get them. They're the ones that fight the battles. If the school district says no, they're the ones that go and say, I want better for my child. They're the ones that are always looking for the best for their child. I'm almost out of time, so I'm going to first I want to give you all a sales pitch. And here's the sales pitch. There's an extreme shortage in teachers of the visually impaired and orientation and mobility specialists. That's why, since I've retired, I've been back there 5 times, because I've covered, because there's not enough certified orientation mobility specialists. If you know anyone who doesn't quite know where they belong in life, they have that bachelor's degree in, I don't know, art history. Not that that's a bad thing, but they don't know what the job they're going to do, and they're looking for something. Tell them about the program at UMass Boston. Tell them that it's grant-driven, it's funded, and they could end up doing something like this, okay? They could be a teacher with visually impaired, they can be an orientation and mobility specialist. The other thing is, Perkins is always looking for people to work. And if you want a really good deal, our teaching assistants who come in, they're an entry-level position. You don't need a lot of skill. Skill is nice, but Perkins is willing to give you training. There also is an opportunity where you can have room and board, where you can live on campus, because we do have residential programs. And the staff, you don't have a great room. It's in the same dorms as the kids are living in. You get the same food that the kids eat. You might have to work in the middle of the night. If the fire alarm goes off, you have to help get the kids out. All right, but you get room and board. Perkins provides tuition reimbursement once you have worked there a year. You get all the benefits, and you get all the opportunities. The man who is currently the director of our high school program, our lower school program, and the Early Learning Center started this way. He's now one of the highest ranking administrators at Perkins. So it's something that, if, like I said, if you know someone who's looking at things, say, well, have you ever thought about this? And the last thing I was going to say is, the Lions organization, we are very grateful, those of us who work in the field of visual impairment. Anytime our students have needed anything, Perkins provides it, but if they're in their home and they don't have a piece of equipment that they can't get, Perkins, Lions have always been there. If they want to go to something like Space Camp, and it's kind of a splurge, but it would be a great opportunity, Lions have always been there. So I want to say thank you, as somebody who's always looking out for, as I would say, my kids. I just think that you should be proud of yourselves, because it really has made a difference. And that's it. Any questions?
Cathy.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm just curious, how has Perkins fared during the period of COVID, and what is their current status?
That's a really good question. The campus is shut down. There are still, at the beginning, everything got shut down, and the kids were all done remotely, and they are not kids that can do well remotely. As soon as people thought, as soon as the vaccine started coming out, the kids were brought back on campus. The staff that works directly with the kids was brought back on campus. We still have portions of our campus where the staff is not back. But it's things like human resources, marketing, the guys who pay our bill, they're all not on campus, they're all working from home. So the only ones who are on campus are the staff working directly with students. And anyone who's working on campus, you have to do a rapid test twice a week at home, and you have to do a PCR test once a week. I work 1 day a week. I have to have a PCR test on that day. I have to take a rapid test before I come on campus, and I have to have a PCR test when I appear. The kids are all tested once a week. The nursing staff does that. And but they're just starting to be a little more generous with who can come on campus. But right now, there are a lot of portions of that they're not there yet. And there's still no talk about when they can return. But there's big signs everywhere. Shut down, you can't come on campus. And it used to be a place where the playground, everybody'd say, bring your kids, have a picnic, use the water parks. But now, no. So that's how it is right now. Every day we get a report of who has COVID or how many people have COVID and what program they're in.
A few years back, before the pandemic, a group of Lions from our club, we had a private tour of Perkins.
With Kevin Hogan.
Yeah, and he's an amazing tour guide, and it was an amazing tour. If you ever get a chance, you've never been there, it's an amazing place.
He is no longer there.
I understand. He said at the time he was probably retiring. And,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, with COVID, he used to do the tours.
Yeah.
And he did the volunteers. And no volunteers and no tours.
right.
So,
But he gave us an amazing history lesson
yes,
too,
yes.
of the start of Perkins and all the transitions it went through. It was just an amazing, amazing place.
He used to be the head of our residential program in the residential part of our program. So I've worked with him for a very long time. And he is amazing.
Did you enjoy your time at the Carroll Center?
I did. I actually did.
Isn't that an amazing place?
I would have been very happy to stay there. But as my mentor said, Perkins is my match.
Yeah.
He knew what he was talking about.
Yeah, they Carroll Center worked with more grown-up.
They're adults, and
Yeah.
most of those individuals are people who lost their vision later on in life. Where our students have lost their vision for
Right.
birth, most of them.
What do they do with infants? You said you had an infant.
You play with them. You encourage them to move around. You want to make sure you stimulate language, reaching out, coming towards a sound. You start building up all the little building blocks you need right away. Getting up and walking. All their motor skills are delayed. People who are visually impaired, they tend to be delayed, and they need to be encouraged to get up and move. It's almost like early intervention, but it's early intervention with a vision piece thrown in. You're helping the parents a lot. You have a child who can't see, and you have a mother and a father who are looking at this child and they're not doing any recognition. It's hard for them in the beginning. That support at the beginning is really important. Anything else?
I just got a letter from the Registry of Motor Vehicles. It said, "You are legally blind." Does that mean they're not gonna renew my driver's license?
Yes, most likely. How did you give them test results or something?
It's letter came from the RMV, said you are legally blind.
But how did they find out?
I can't hear.
How did the motor vehicles find out?
How did they,
How did they find out that you were blind?
I don't know.
The
Are you blind?
doctor must have sent a
The
letter.
doctor must have said.
Yeah.
They took a tough reading.
I see.
Yeah.
I can't see.
That machine might help you.
They
Oh,
might.
yeah, that's, yeah.
Yeah.
They do a similar sort of thing with the computer too.
You can.
Lowering it up.
Yeah, you can. Yeah. Anything else?
The 20 businesses and professions that donated $50 are on that sheet of paper, and because I'm not doing so good, I'm not going to hand them out, but you can pick them up if you're interested in the 20 companies.
The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a copy of my old business cards just because they're really cool. This is what Perkins business cards look like. You have regular print, large print, and braille. So it's just really fun but this is not accurate anymore because I'm not there. But you can each have one if you want, just because they're kind of fun. And I have a million of them left.
Do you work with veterans at all?
I don't.
Who
That
gives
would've
the
been-
veterans help?
Mass Commission for the Blind, or actually the VA.
The VA?
That's where I wanted to go when I would do my student teaching. I wanted to go to the VA hospital.
Would you train any of the instructors that work with the,
Around here, depending on how, yes. Because if they went to the school in the Boston area, yes.
okay.
I had everyone.
Thank you, sir.
The other question I had is, the dogs
Yep.
that you see, do you work with them at all? Or-
I have. That's a whole separate thing. People who go to dog guide school have to be able to travel independently before they can even apply.
I see.
Usually you have to have an orientation mobility specialist fill out the application so that they can be admitted into the program at the different guide dog schools.
I do.
Then after they have their guide dogs and they're working with their guide dogs, sometimes they would go to a new location and they need to learn that new location, and an orientation mobility instructor would go with them to learn their neighborhood, learn their new job site, whatever it is, so that they can do things. And you would kind of somewhat work with the dog, but usually the person, it's their dog, and they will do everything with the dog. You're orienting the person to the area. Guide dogs don't know where they're going. The person tells them where to go. They do learn familiar areas, like if they go to the same bus stop every day, they will take you to the bus stop. But they don't know where you're going. And you have to know that. They will disobey you if you tell them to cross the street and there's a car coming.
Yeah.
And they will block you. Okay?
Cathy, I want to thank you for
Oh,
a
you're
wonderful
welcome.
presentation. All right, so we're into our presentation. Do I have a motion to dismiss?
Motion to adjourn this meeting.
Second. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you.
That was,
Thank you so very much.
You're welcome.
that was the best presentation I've ever seen.
Oh, thank you. It's fun.
I graduated from BC
Did you?
in the 70s.